The courtroom was unusually quiet for a Monday morning. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting narrow beams across the wooden floor. Reporters whispered from the back row, their cameras off, but ready. Courtroom sketch artists sat poised with charcoal pencils, waiting to capture the moment. The atmosphere wasn't tense, it was heavy, like air before a storm. At the front of the room, seated beside her attorney, sat a small girl in a navy blue sweater. Her shoes didn't quite touch the floor. She clutched a frayed notebook with both hands, her eyes scanning the room like she was preparing to be attacked. Her name was Emily Parker. She was 12 years old. Beside her, lying quietly on the floor with his head on his paws, was Max, a 5-year-old golden retriever with a gentle face and sharp eyes. He wore a blue service dog vest with a patch that read, "Do not pet, working dog." Max was more than a comfort animal. He was Emily's guardian, her silent companion, and as the court was about to find out, something much more. At the defense table sat Roger Hensley, a clean-shaven man in his late 40s. His gray suit was perfectly pressed, his tie dark red, his posture straight. He looked like a man in control, a man with nothing to hide. He was also the defendant, the man Emily had accused of things so dark the initial police reports had been sealed from the public. Roger had been Emily's foster father for nearly 2 years. By all appearances, he was a good man. A retired firefighter, a decorated community volunteer, and a Sunday school teacher. But according to Emily's quiet testimony during initial interviews with police and therapists, behind closed doors, he had become someone else entirely. The courtroom had never allowed an emotional support dog before, but Judge Randall Hayes had made an exception. It wasn't out of sympathy, it was strategy. Emily had refused to testify without Max present, and with the accusations against Roger so serious, the court couldn't afford to lose its only eyewitness. As the judge entered and the room stood, Max didn't flinch. He had been trained for environments just like this, unpredictable, crowded, high stress. But his eyes never left Emily's. Even when the judge spoke, Max watched her hands and face, reading her emotions like a book. Judge Hayes gavelled the court into order and briefly reviewed the case. Emily would testify today. The jury, 12 ordinary people, now wearing expressions of quiet dread, were about to hear the voice of a girl who had barely spoken a word since her removal from the Hensley home 6 months earlier. Emily's attorney leaned toward her. "Ready?" he whispered. Emily nodded faintly. Her fingers brushed the thick fur at the base of Max's neck. The dog stirred slightly, then stilled. That was her signal. Not the special one, just a reassurance that she wasn't alone. As she took the stand, the room held its breath. She didn't look at Roger. She didn't look at the jury. She looked at Max, who now sat upright by her attorney's feet, tail still, ears perked. Her first few answers were barely above a whisper, but the microphone picked them up clearly. "Emily, do you know why you're here today?" her lawyer asked gently. She nodded. "Yes. Can you tell us what happened?" She hesitated. Roger, he hurt me." Gasps were audible despite the judge's warning. The defense attorney immediately objected, claiming the answer was too vague. Sustained. The questioning moved forward, more cautiously. Emily recounted moments of fear, confusion, and things no child should ever have to describe. Her tone never wavered, but her hands shook slightly. Max remained alert. The defense took over, their strategy clear. Shake her story, make her contradict herself, cast doubt. The attorney, a tall man with a confident grin, paced in front of the jury. "Emily," he said slowly, "you said this happened in January. Are you sure it wasn't February?" "I'm sure," she said. "But school records show you were homesick in February, not January." "I was sick in both." He smirked. Right. But do you remember which day exactly this incident occurred? Emily looked confused. The courtroom leaned forward. Her fingers twitched. Max's ears perked. And then it happened. She made the signal. It was tiny. A flick of her right hand behind her back settle, invisible to everyone except Max. But to him, it was a trigger. Instantly, the dog stood, head lifted, and growled low in his throat, not aggressively, but with laser focus. His gaze locked on Roger. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel. Order. Is something wrong with the dog? Judge Hayes asked sharply. Emily blinked. He's responding to the signal. What signal? Her attorney stood. Your Honor, if I may, this is a trained psychological alert dog. The signal Emily just gave is a warning. Q. The dog is trained to alert when she perceives a lie or emotional danger. He's done it before in therapy. It's documented. The defense attorney laughed. We're taking testimony from a dog now? But no one laughed with him. The judge leaned forward. Do you have documentation to support this? I do, her attorney replied. We submitted it last week. His training, his credentials, and Emily's therapist's written account. The judge turned to the clerk. Verify it now. Court will recess for 10 minutes. The judge rose, and so did Max. He didn't growl anymore, but he didn't sit either. His eyes never left Roger. The accused man had gone pale. In the hallway, reporters were buzzing. This case had just taken a sharp turn, and no one could have predicted it would be triggered, not by a dramatic outburst, not by a confession, but by a little girl's silent gesture to her dog. 10 minutes had never passed so slowly. While the courtroom buzzed with whispers, Emily sat quietly on the hallway bench, her small frame dwarfed by the wooden panels behind her. She didn't say a word. Max sat beside her, his head resting. On her knee, his tail still. His calm presence was like a weighted blanket on her heart. Across the hallway, her attorney was in a side room with the judge's clerk, who was verifying the documents they had filed about Max. A complete file, updated regularly by Emily's therapist, included not only Max's certifications and training logs, but also specific behavioral records. One entry stood out. March 3rd, session number 12. Emily used silent hand signal while speaking about her former foster home. Max immediately responded with a low growl. This matched a prior incident where Emily refused to speak until Max felt safe. This is his third recorded behavioral alert. Recommend documentation for legal reference. In the courtroom, Judge Hayes reviewed the documents himself, reading line by line. The language was clinical, but the implications were heavy. Max wasn't just a comfort animal. He had been trained to respond to more than stress. His job was to sense invisible patterns in his handler's emotional state and respond accordingly. He was, in effect, her truth detector. Back in the hallway, Roger Hensley paced silently in a small circle near the elevators. His normally confident expression was gone. He had broken out in a sweat shortly after Max growled. His lawyer stood beside him, speaking in a hushed, urgent voice. Look, his lawyer said, we don't know how this will play out. The jury saw that dog growl at you. They'll try to spin it like it means something. Roger glared at him. It's a dog. It's a trained dog. That matters. Trained to do what? Bark when she scratches her nose? The lawyer didn't answer. He just rubbed his temples. Something had shifted. Everyone in the courtroom had felt it. Emily hadn't flinched. She hadn't cried. She had calmly given a command, and the dog had reacted, not to fear, not to noise, but to something deeper. And it had been directed squarely at Roger. When the court resumed, Judge Hayes leaned over the bench with a hard expression. "I've reviewed the submitted documents," he said. "They are valid. This dog is trained not just for emotional support, but for behavioral alerts and trauma. Survivors. The court will acknowledge the dog's role as an alert animal. It doesn't make it a witness, but it does mean we take its responses seriously." The defense attorney rose, clearly annoyed. "With respect, Your Honor, we cannot let this devolve into trial by dog." "You made your point," the judge snapped. "You also antagonized a child witness during questioning. The jury saw it. We're moving forward." The jury members, now visibly more alert, watched closely as Emily returned to the stand. She didn't look nervous. Her eyes were tired, but focused. Max took his place beside her chair. Her attorney resumed. "Emily, can you tell the court how you and Max developed this silent signal?" She nodded. "My therapist taught me. I can use it when I'm scared or feel unsafe." "And what does Max do when you use it?" "He gets ready. He watches. Sometimes he growls." "Did you use that signal earlier when the defense was asking you questions?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because he was lying." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. "Who was lying, Emily?" Emily looked straight at Roger. Him. Roger didn't react, but his lawyer shifted in his seat. The judge banged the gavel. "Order. Let the record show the witness stated the defendant was lying during questioning." The defense attorney stood. "Objection, Your Honor. This is speculative." "She didn't speculate," the judge interrupted. She responded, "Based on her perception and her trained alert animal's reaction, you will address it during cross-examination." And so the defense did. Roger's attorney stood, straightened his tie, and slowly approached the stand. "Emily," he said, his voice slower now, softer. "I'm not here to scare you. I'm just trying to understand. You said Roger was lying. About what? When?" "He said he didn't do anything," she replied. "But can you prove he did something? Or are you just remembering what people told you?" "I remember," she said firmly. "Even though this happened a long time ago?" Emily's fingers twitched. Max straightened again. The defense attorney froze. He took a step back. "You're giving him that signal again, aren't you?" "Yes." "Why now?" "Because you're lying too," she said. The courtroom fell absolutely silent. The defense attorney scoffed. "I'm just asking questions." "But you already know he hurt me," Emily said softly. Judge Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Counselor?" The defense attorney shook his head. No further questions. Max relaxed again, but didn't lie down. He remained seated, as if expecting something else to happen. When the jury was dismissed for the day, Judge Hayes called both attorneys into chambers. Emily remained seated with Max, petting the top of his head softly. A reporter slipped a note to her attorney before leaving. "That dog is going to win her the case, and I hope he does." Outside, Roger refused to make eye contact with anyone. His grip on his briefcase was so tight, his knuckles turned white. And for the first time since the trial began, his mask of confidence was cracking. Because deep down, he didn't understand how, but that dog knew something. By the following morning, the entire courthouse buzzed with one name, Max. The dog had become an overnight sensation, though no reporters were allowed inside with cameras. Still, word spread fast. The silent service dog that growled at the accused. During a child abuse trial, court TV pundits speculated wildly. Was it theater? A trained performance? Or was something more primal at play? Judge Hayes had instructed the jury to avoid media, but he knew that was nearly impossible. The courtroom today felt different, heavier. Even the bailiffs seemed more on edge. Emily sat beside her attorney once again, dressed the same as before. Her blue sweater slightly more rumpled. Her eyes were tired, but she looked calm. Max sat alert beside her, his leash wrapped gently around her wrist. He had never left her side, Not in the hotel room, not in the car, not once during the sleepless night. Across the courtroom, Roger Hensley no longer looked like the composed man from day one. His tie was crooked, and his eyes darted toward Max every few seconds like he expected another growl. His attorney, though still trying to look confident, now avoided challenging Emily directly. When the judge entered and court resumed, everyone leaned in just a little closer. Emily's attorney rose. "Your Honor, in light of the dog's behavioral alerts and the child's consistent responses under pressure, we'd like to enter new testimony from the licensed therapist who trained Emily and Max on their communication system." The defense objected, arguing irrelevance and emotional manipulation, but Judge Hayes overruled it. "Bring in the witness," he ordered. Dr. Sarah Lynn entered the courtroom with a calm, clinical energy. She was in her late 30s, her black-framed glasses giving her the air of someone who spoke carefully and only when necessary. The jury paid attention. She was sworn in, took the stand, and explained her credentials. Ph.D. in child psychology. Specialization in trauma therapy, over 15 years working with abuse survivors. She had supervised Emily's sessions for nearly a year. "Can you explain the hand signal Emily uses with Max?" her lawyer asked. Dr. Lynn nodded. "It's a simple 2-finger tap on her leg, followed by a flick of the wrist. It's a private cue meant to be unnoticeable to others." "And Max's response?" "Max is trained to detect spikes in heart rate, cortisol levels, micro-expressions of fear or panic. When the signal is used, he enters alert mode. If he senses deception or threat, he reacts. Like he did yesterday?" "Exactly." The defense pounced. "But he's not a lie detector, is he, Dr. Lynn?" "No, he's better. He reads emotional shifts in a person he's bonded with. And unlike a polygraph, he doesn't need wires." The jury chuckled softly. "Is it possible," the defense continued, "that the dog is just responding to the girl's fear?" "Yes, but in therapy sessions, we tested this." Max did. Not growl at social workers, police officers, or even male therapists. He only reacted when Emily described a specific figure, her foster father. On one occasion, he growled at a visitor she hadn't seen in months. The court leaned in. "Who was the visitor?" her lawyer asked. Dr. Lynn checked her notes. "A man named Barry Quinn, a friend of Roger Hensley." Gasps echoed. Roger's face paled. The prosecution immediately requested a break to verify that detail. 10 minutes later, investigators confirmed that Barry Quinn had once lived too. Doors down from Roger. He had fled the state 3 days after police opened an investigation into Emily's claims. No one had located him since. Now the defense lawyer looked genuinely unsettled. The judge leaned forward. "Are you requesting a material witness warrant for Mr. Quinn?" "Yes, Your Honor," said the prosecutor. "He may be critical to understanding the full scope of abuse in the Hensley home." The judge approved it. Roger whispered something furiously to his lawyer, who raised his hands helplessly. He couldn't stop what had just happened. The case had changed shape. It was no longer about a traumatized girl and her testimony. It was now about a trail of men, a vanished accomplice, and a dog that had sensed something long before humans. Caught up. Later that afternoon, surveillance footage from Roger's neighborhood resurfaced, long forgotten and previously overlooked. An officer had pulled it from a neighbor's home security system. Most of it was uneventful. Kids riding, bikes, trash pickups. But then, one clip caught everyone's attention. The jury was shown the footage on the court's flat screen. It was grainy, time-stamped 7 months ago, showing Roger in his driveway, standing close to a man matching Barry Quinn's description. They were talking in low, intense tones. Then, Roger handed the man a brown envelope. No sound, no context. But Emily could be seen in the background, half hidden behind the curtains of the living room. The courtroom froze. She saw it, someone whispered. She knew. Emily, watching the footage, didn't cry. She just looked at Max, then gave the tiniest nod. And Max, as if sensing her relief, laid down slowly and rested his head on his paws. He didn't growl. He didn't twitch. For the first time since the trial began, he looked at peace. The judge cleared his throat. This court finds cause to expand the scope of this trial. The evidence now suggests that this may not have been an isolated case. He turned toward Roger, who had gone completely still. I suggest, Mr. Hensley, that you speak with your attorney. Roger said nothing. Emily left the stand for the day, her hand resting on Max's head the whole way back. The audience watched in silence. Some whispered. Some clapped softly. One juror wiped a tear. And outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Emily didn't care about them. Max had done what no human could. He had protected her in a room full of adults by simply watching and reacting when the truth was buried too deep for words. The courtroom was darker the next morning, overcast clouds hanging low outside, mirroring the growing storm inside. The moment Emily had identified Barry Quinn's name, everything began to unravel faster than anyone could have predicted. Roger. Hensley was no longer relaxed. He arrived with his tie undone, jacket slung over his shoulder. His lawyer trailed him, hurried, his face tight with worry. Roger muttered under his breath, but the bailiff watched him closely. It was obvious the trial was shifting, and so far, not in his favor. The prosecution wasted no time. With Judge Hayes' approval, they called Detective Mira Collins to the stand. Her file was thick, her voice calm, but her words cut clean. We reopened digital archives from a neighbor's home security system, she explained, and matched the man seen with Mr. Hensley to Barry Quinn through DMV records. We also confirmed Barry Quinn's flight out of state occurred 72 hours after a child protection investigation was launched. Did anyone interview Barry Quinn at the time? The prosecutor asked. We tried. He had already left. A subpoena was issued, but we lost his trail. And now, we've requested federal assistance to locate him. We believe he's hiding. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. The idea that a key witness might be evading justice added an unsettling weight to the trial. The defense objected again, but this time, Judge Hayes shut it down immediately. The facts are piling up, he said sternly. And so far, your client is surrounded by vanishing friends and a growing list of red flags. Roger's face twitched. Emily sat calmly behind the prosecution's table, Max lying beside her, quiet and observant. Her posture had changed. She no longer looked like a scared child. She looked composed, and her silence held more power than any shouting witness ever could. During the recess, the prosecution team gathered in chambers with the judge. New information had come in overnight. An anonymous tip had been submitted to the court hotline from a woman named Lindsay Giroux. She was Barry Quinn's ex-girlfriend, now living in Texas. She'd seen the news reports online. She had once visited Roger's house during a barbecue and remembered something strange. I thought it was weird how quiet the girl was, her recorded message said. She sat alone the whole time, and Barry kept telling her not to touch anything or talk unless spoken to. The prosecution requested her statement be entered into evidence. The judge agreed. Outside, the media frenzy began to grow. Still photos of Max sitting upright in court circulated online. Hashtags like #JusticeForEmily and #HeroDogMax trended on social media. People began camping outside the courthouse. Local restaurants offered free meals to courthouse staff. Everyone wanted a front row seat to a story that felt like a real-life movie. But inside, the real drama hadn't even peaked. The next witness called by the prosecution was unexpected, a former neighbor of Roger's named Mrs. Geraldine Waters. A retired teacher in her 70s, she wore large sunglasses and carried a cane. Her demeanor was no nonsense. She was sworn in and asked to describe anything unusual she remembered from the time Emily lived with Roger. "Well," she said, "I always thought something was off about that house. The girl never played outside, never went to school from what I could see, just sat in the window with that dog." "What dog?" the lawyer asked. "That golden retriever. The one she has now? Max, right?" Everyone looked at Max, who blinked slowly, as if he understood the moment was about him. Mrs. Waters continued, "One night, around 10, I saw Mr. Hensley dragging something heavy into the garage. I didn't say anything at the time. I just thought it was none of my business. But now I wonder, what do you think it was? Could have been a suitcase or a trunk. But the strange part? That dog was barking like mad. Then suddenly it stopped. Just like that. Silence. Max didn't bark now, but he sat up straighter. The jury whispered among themselves. The prosecution thanked the witness. When the defense cross-examined her, they tried to suggest old age had affected her memory. She smiled and leaned forward. "Son, I might forget where I put my reading glasses, but I never forget a child's scream or a dog's silence." Emily looked down. Her fingers reached for Max's fur. He leaned into her touch. The judge ordered another short recess. As people filed out, Roger turned to his lawyer. "This is all falling apart. You think?" His lawyer snapped. "You should have told me about Barry. I didn't think he'd matter. Well, he matters now. And so does that dog." In a private hallway, Emily spoke for the first time since the hearing started that morning. "Max always knew," she told her lawyer softly. "Knew what?" he asked. "That something bad was happening. I didn't even have to tell him. He just knew." Her lawyer paused. "How long has he protected you like that?" "Since the first night I got to Roger's house," she said. "I couldn't sleep. Max wouldn't stop pacing. He growled at Roger's door every night." Her words chilled him, not just because of what they meant, but because she'd kept it all inside for so long. Max had been her voice when she couldn't speak. Back in the courtroom, the judge reconvened and made a firm declaration. This case now has multiple connections: missing persons, behavioral alerts from a certified support dog, and unexplained video surveillance. I will allow a broader investigation to move forward. The jury will remain sequestered until this case concludes. Roger Hensley's jaw clenched. The jury watched him like hawks now. The man once praised for being a pillar of the community now looked like a cornered animal. The more people uncovered about him, the clearer it became, the mask he wore in. Public was never real, but Max had seen through it from the very beginning. The air in the courtroom was electric. Everyone knew the case had shifted far beyond a simple abuse accusation. It had grown deeper, darker, spilling into conspiracies, cover-ups, and something the community had never expected from one of its so-called heroes. Roger Hensley, once a decorated firefighter and trusted foster parent, now sat hunched at the defense table like a man waiting for a dam to break. It would break before the day was over. The morning session began with new evidence that had taken investigators all night to uncover. At the prosecution's request, the judge allowed a new flash drive to be entered into the case file. Detective Mira Collins was called back to the stand. She approached the bench, holding the drive with gloved fingers and carefully placed it in front of the judge. "This," she said clearly, "is home surveillance footage from a security company, previously contracted by Mr. Hensley. The system was believed to be deactivated months before the investigation began. However, backup files were stored in the cloud. We gained access last night. The court technician set up the monitor. The lights dimmed slightly. Judge Hayes addressed the jury. You will view sensitive material. If any juror feels uncomfortable, please inform the bailiff. No one moved. The footage played. At first, the screen showed the living room. Empty. Dim lighting. The timestamp read 2:18 a.m. A few moments in, Roger appeared on screen, walking quietly, glancing over his shoulder. He knelt by a locked drawer under the entertainment cabinet and removed a thick file folder, then a small digital camera. The footage cut to a second angle, this time showing the kitchen. The same night, Roger and Barry Quinn appeared together. Barry leaned in, whispering. Roger nodded. He handed Barry the folder. Barry stuffed it into a bag. Then came the detail that silenced the courtroom. In the corner of the screen, almost unnoticeable, was a child's silhouette. Emily, watching from the hallway. Barefoot, still. She saw it all. Gasps filled the room. The judge banged the gavel, but didn't stop the video. The next clip showed Barry leaving the house through the back door. Roger stood alone, staring at the door for a long moment. Then, suddenly, Max appeared. The golden retriever entered the frame, barking. Not yipping or yelping, barking with purpose. Loud, sharp. He placed himself between Roger and the hallway. Roger took a step toward the dog. Max didn't back down. He growled, deep and steady. Roger raised a hand like he was going to hit him, but stopped. The screen went black. Silence. The court didn't breathe. The judge leaned back slowly, visibly stunned. He turned to the defense table. Roger looked like he had aged 10 years. In 5 minutes, his lawyer stared at the screen, lips parted, eyes wide. There was no strategy left to explain this. Emily didn't cry. She just looked at Max, and for a brief second, Max raised his head, eyes fixed on the screen, as if remembering. He let out one short huff of air, then rested again. Calm, unshaken. The jury took notice. The prosecutor stood. We now have video proof that the defendant transferred unknown documents to a man who is currently missing and potentially fleeing the law. We also have a timeline placing Emily as an eyewitness to the transaction and clear evidence that Max identified. A threat before anyone else recognized one. The footage supports the child's claims and calls into question every denial Mr. Hensley has made. Judge Hayes addressed the defense. Do you wish to respond? The lawyer slowly stood. He didn't look at his client. No questions. Your Honor, court was adjourned for the day. The jury was escorted out quickly. Reporters stormed the hallway. Roger was led to a side room by his lawyer, who no longer offered comforting words. That night, the video aired on national news. It was trimmed to exclude Emily's silhouette for privacy, but the rest spread like wildfire. Commentators praised Max's instincts. Victims of abuse wrote online about how animals had protected them when no one else did. Pet trainers and psychologists appeared on talk shows discussing emotional detection in dogs. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Max knew. Hashtag listen to dogs. And hashtag believe Emily. The next morning, the courthouse was surrounded by people holding signs. Justice for Emily. Dogs don't lie. Max is our hero. Emily arrived through a private entrance. The media frenzy was overwhelming, and her attorney had insisted on extra security. Max, however, walked proudly beside her, head high, tail still, step steady. He was calm even in chaos. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution motioned to formally introduce the footage into the case and requested permission to search Roger Hensley's garage, referencing Mrs. Waters' testimony from earlier in the week. Judge Hayes didn't hesitate. Motion granted. Execute the search immediately. Roger's head dropped. Less than 2 hours later, Detective Collins returned to court with a photo envelope. She handed it to the judge. His eyes narrowed as he flipped through the images. He looked at the courtroom. A locked chest was found in Mr. Hensley's garage. Inside were 8 camcorder tapes, 3 flash drives, and folders marked with initials matching former foster children once placed in the defendant's care. The courtroom exploded. The judge didn't call for order immediately. He allowed the noise to settle on its own. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but firm. "Mr. Hensley, based on this new evidence, you are now under investigation for additional crimes relating to the endangerment and possible abuse of multiple minors under your supervision. This trial will proceed, but further criminal charges may be added." Roger didn't respond. Emily sat still. Max didn't move. The judge turned to the jury. This case is no longer about one girl's testimony. It's about years of silence and one remarkable animal who refused to let the truth be buried. He looked at Max, then nodded. Let the record show. The dog was right. The sun hadn't risen yet, but federal agents and state detectives were already combing through Roger Hensley's property. The chest found in his garage was only the beginning. Inside it, neatly stored between the camcorder tapes and flash drives, was a handwritten list titled Whispers. Each name came with dates, codes, and single-word labels like silent, defiant, removed, and moved. All of them were children. When Detective Mira Collins scanned the list, she recognized 2 names. Both were part of old foster reports marked inconclusive. Reports that had quietly disappeared years earlier. Now they were back, and this time they had a voice. That morning, in a tightly secured conference room in the courthouse basement, Detective Collins met with the prosecution team. For the first time, she laid everything out: photos, videos, the Whispers list, Max's alerts, Emily's testimony, and even a call log retrieved from Barry Quinn's missing phone. The phone had been found buried behind a motel in Utah. Inside were dozens of deleted messages restored by the tech team. One message, dated 3 weeks before Barry vanished, simply read, "The girl knows. The dog does too. Burn it all." The courtroom reopened that afternoon with standing room only. This trial was no longer local news. It was a national obsession. Social workers, lawyers, families, and pet behaviorists were glued to the updates. A child's silent signal and a dog's protective instinct had unearthed something much bigger. Than one criminal, it had pierced a system that had allowed him to operate for years. Judge Hayes began with a statement. The court acknowledges that this case has entered a complex phase. We are no longer discussing isolated incidents, but potentially organized misconduct, falsified foster reports, and threats to child welfare. Today, we will allow the prosecution to introduce evidence from what is now known as the Whispers file. Emily was not in the courtroom that day. Her guardian had decided she needed rest, but Max was there. He lay at the side of the gallery, his head resting between his paws, eyes following every person who spoke. The prosecution called their next witness, Angela Vega, a 17-year-old girl who had once been placed with Roger Hensley 6 years prior. She was no longer afraid. She had waited too long to speak. Angela walked confidently to the stand. The room fell silent. "Miss Vega," the prosecutor began, "do you recognize this man?" She pointed to Roger. Angela didn't blink. "Yes. He was my foster father." "And did anything happen while you were in his care?" Angela nodded. "He had rules that didn't make sense. He didn't like when we asked questions. If we said the wrong thing at school, we didn't eat. If we cried, he'd lock us in the shed. He said no one would believe us anyway." Gasps swept through the audience. The prosecutor handed her a photo. "Do you recognize this dog?" Angela looked down at the image of Max. She smiled, tears instantly welling in her eyes. "That's Max. He was just a puppy when I was there." "Did anything happen with Max while you were living with Mr. Hensley?" Angela inhaled shakily. Yes. One night, I was crying in my room. Roger barged in, yelling. But Max came running and jumped between us. He growled. He didn't let Roger touch me. After that, Max wouldn't leave my room at night. He always slept by the door. Did you tell anyone? No one would listen. And what happened to Max after you were moved? Angela looked down. I thought he was gone. I never knew he stayed. The courtroom was still. Several jurors wiped tears. Judge Hayes leaned forward, clearly shaken. Max lifted his head, slightly as if sensing the girl's voice. His eyes met hers for just a second. Angela covered her mouth. She whispered, "He remembers." The prosecutor then introduced the full list from the Whispers file. One by one, names were read. Aloud, each now verified by adoption records, closed reports, or witnesses like Angela. The judge allowed only initials for privacy, but the implication was clear. Dozens of children had suffered under a system that failed them, and one man who had manipulated it. Back in the side hallway, defense attorney George Wilkins leaned close to Roger. We're done. You understand that? The jury has turned. The judge has turned. You have two options. Plead now and save yourself life without parole, or ride this wave and drown. Roger said nothing. In the gallery, Emily's attorney leaned close to Detective Collins. You realize Max isn't just a pet anymore. Collins nodded. He's a witness. That evening, prosecutors filed a motion to have Max officially recognized as part of the evidence timeline. His behavioral responses, including courtroom alerts and video footage, were to be logged and treated as legal indicators of trauma response and environmental danger similar to lie detection markers in human testimony. It was unprecedented, but not impossible. By nightfall, Emily was home watching the news. Her aunt sat beside her, holding her hand. Max was curled at her feet. On the screen, a news anchor announced the motion. Emily didn't say a word. She reached down, touched Max's paw, and gave the same silent hand signal she had given in court days before, 2 fingers over her lips, then to her heart. Max didn't bark this time. He simply nudged her hand with his nose. Outside, storm. Clouds rolled over the courthouse as if matching the weight of what was still to come. Roger Hensley hadn't spoken a word since the morning recess. He sat stiffly at the defense table, jaw clenched, watching the jury with eyes that no longer radiated control but fear. His expensive suit, once pressed and polished, now looked crumpled under courtroom lights. Sweat gleamed on his forehead, and his lips were cracked from chewing them nervously. Outside, the courthouse buzzed with protesters and news vans. Inside, silence held the room hostage. The jury knew this wasn't just about Emily anymore. It wasn't even just about the Whispers file. This was about years of hidden pain, finally surfacing. Judge Hayes took the bench after lunch. Expression grim. He held a document in his hand hot off the printer. The bailiff had handed it to him just before returning to court. It was a transcript. A whisper recorded accidentally by a hot mic. He adjusted his glasses and read aloud. Stupid dog ruined everything. The courtroom gasped. One juror audibly whispered, "He said that?" Judge Hayes slammed the gavel once. Order. Let the record show that the defendant, Roger Hensley, made this statement yesterday during courtroom recess while still under oath. We will allow the prosecution to submit it as new evidence of intent and awareness. Roger's defense attorney looked pale. Objection, Your Honor. Overruled, the judge snapped. The defendant made a statement of guilt, unprompted, in a room where he had no expectation of privacy. We will proceed. In the gallery, Max stirred. His ears twitched, as if he, too, knew the tide had turned. The prosecution didn't wait. They called Officer Neil Dempsey, a digital forensic specialist, to the stand. He had spent the last 36 hours reviewing the confiscated footage and files from Roger's home, including previously damaged hard drives. "What did you find?" the prosecutor asked. Officer Dempsey glanced at the jury. "Everything." He explained how the footage showed multiple children over several years. Emily appeared in one, Angela in another. Some footage was timed precisely with dates on the Whispers list. But one video just one showed Roger speaking directly into the camera. It was dated 2 years ago. On screen, Roger said, "If they ever talk, it won't matter. They're foster kids. Nobody believes them. You scare 'em enough, they shut down. That's how this works. But that mutt, he's trouble. Too smart." He smirked at the camera, unaware that this file would one day destroy him. Back in the courtroom, Emily's aunt covered her mouth with both hands. The jury sat frozen. One juror had tears in her eyes. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said slowly, "at this time, we ask the court to consider a plea negotiation only. If the defendant is willing to provide names, every name of individuals involved in covering up these acts, and those connected to the missing children tied to the Whispers file." Judge Hayes turned toward Roger. "Do you understand what's being offered?" Roger's eyes darted between the jury and his attorney. "You want me to name names? You want to avoid a life sentence?" the judge asked coldly. "Start talking." For the first time, Roger's voice cracked. "I didn't do this alone." "Then who helped you?" Roger looked down at the table. "People you'd never expect." "Start listing them," Judge Hayes said, "or we proceed." The courtroom held its breath. Roger began speaking. Names, dates, coordinators. One local child protection agency worker. A retired detective. Even an administrator in the foster placement office. Each name written down. Each one about to face justice. But when he got to the last name, the courtroom went silent again. He said, "Barry Quinn." The prosecutor frowned. "You're claiming Barry Quinn helped you?" Roger shook his head. "No, he tried to stop me. That's why he disappeared." A chill ran down every spine in the room. Emily's aunt looked stunned. Max sat up straight, as if he knew what was coming. Roger continued. "He found something on me. Told me he'd go to the police. He said the girl saw too much. But I wasn't worried about her. I was worried about that damn dog." He paused. "He was too loyal. Knew when I got near her, even when I smiled. That's not normal. That dog isn't just trained, he feels it." Then, in a near whisper, Roger said, "That dog knew I wanted to hurt her before I even moved." Gasps, audible ones. Emily's attorney stood immediately. "Your Honor, we're asking for a full statement from the defendant under oath, and we demand Barry Quinn's body be located based on this testimony." Judge Hayes agreed. "We'll pause court for 72 hours for law enforcement to verify this confession and begin locating the others named in this statement." Roger was escorted out of the courtroom. He didn't speak again. Outside, storm clouds cracked lightning across the sky. The courthouse seemed surrounded not just by news vans, but by truth itself, too large to stay hidden anymore. That night, search teams used Roger's information to track the remote property where Barry Quinn's car had been last seen. In the woods near a frozen stream, they uncovered partial remains buried beneath a false rock slab. Dental records confirmed it. Barry Quinn was gone. But in his pocket, inside a sealed plastic bag, was one final note. "To whoever finds this, Emily was right. Max knows the truth. Follow the dog." The courtroom was packed to capacity. Cameras were banned, but the air crackled with anticipation. The trial that had captivated the nation was finally reaching its climax. Emily sat quietly on the witness stand, Max at her feet, his golden fur gleaming under the courtroom lights. He was no longer just a support dog. He was a symbol of truth, resilience, and unwavering loyalty. Judge Hayes adjusted his glasses and looked across the courtroom. He cleared his throat. After weeks of testimony, new evidence, and several confessions, this court is ready to proceed with sentencing. Roger Hensley, shackled and pale, rose slowly. His eyes avoided the crowd. The man who once commanded respect was now a convicted felon, awaiting the consequences of years of abuse and deception. The prosecutor summarized the case with quiet but firm words. Your Honor, Emily Thompson's courage, combined with Max's extraordinary instincts, uncovered a network of abuse that had been silenced for too long. This is not just a victory for one child, but for every child who couldn't speak out. She turned to the jury. Thank you for believing Emily, for listening to the silent voice of a dog who refused to be ignored. The jury, foreperson, nodded. We find the defendant guilty on all counts. Roger's face went pale. He didn't speak. The judge then addressed the court. In light of the overwhelming evidence and the defendant's cooperation with law enforcement in identifying others responsible, this court sentences Roger Hensley to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. A murmur swept through the courtroom. For Emily, it was the first moment she allowed herself to breathe. Max shifted closer, resting his head gently on her lap. Outside the courthouse, news outlets covered every moment. Stories flooded social media, highlighting the bond between Emily and Max and the way a dog's silent gesture had turned the tide of justice. For Emily, the battle was far from over. Healing would take time. Therapy sessions would continue. But with Max by her side, she felt ready to face the future. Weeks later, Emily and her aunt visited a park bathed in sunlight. Max ran freely, chasing after a ball thrown by Emily's aunt. The laughter of children filled the air, a sound Emily had almost forgotten. Her attorney approached, smiling gently. Emily, I have good news. The state is reviewing foster care policies because of your case. Changes will be made. No other child should suffer in silence. Emily looked at Max. She gave her familiar silent hand signal. 2 fingers over lips, and a heart. Max wagged his tail. In the quiet of that afternoon, surrounded by warmth and hope, Emily knew one thing for sure sometimes. The smallest voices speak the loudest truths, especially when accompanied by a friend who listens without words.